My father left my daughter, who is 3, about $500,000 in a trust. The trustee is not a family member, but a professional trustee. My daughter is supposed to begin receiving the money at 25, but they explain that they have the power to dispense money early for the right circumstances, like a private school or medical bills, or, as they very loosely and briefly mentioned, basic living costs in an emergency hardship situation. They gave an example that if I were to become ill and unable to work, the trust could provide some level of assistance to ensure my daughter does have food on her plate and a roof over her head. However, this was glossed over pretty quickly, and I don't know the technical details. About 2 months ago, my ex-husband quit his job because he said they are unwilling to be flexible with him for his debilitating migraines. His employer told me that he claims to have migraines but has never actually seen a doctor about them for treatment, and says he has been unable to find a new job and intends to instead pursue getting on disability, but expects that to take 2 to 3 years. He says that he will soon lose his apartment. He is unable to receive most government-based assistance because he scammed that system last year, lied about income to receive food assistance, which he was not qualified, and got caught. So he has now approached the trustee and wants to use the trust money to pay for an apartment, utilities, and a car until he is approved for disability. I was especially surprised about the car portion. He says he needs money to purchase a safer vehicle because his vehicle is old, rated poorly for crashes, and does not have working seatbelts. Which is a surprise to me. Just a few weeks ago, I buckled her into the back seat when he picked her up, so not sure what exactly he is claiming there. I disagree with this use of the funds, particularly because he only has her for 6 days per month. I understand the ability to use the trust for living expenses should be limited to scenarios in which she is genuinely in danger of being homeless or neglected. And that is not the case, as I provide everything she needs now and can do so all the time if he is unable to. My father intended the money to provide her with opportunities once she is old enough to use it wisely, not to facilitate my husband's visitation and our custody agreement. Since my ex-husband has a history of committing fraud when receiving government assistance and also a history of faking illness, he lied to a previous employer to receive paid time off claiming he was being treated for cancer when he was not. I do not trust that his intentions here are genuine. I suspect he sees the trust as a way that he can get free money so that he doesn't have to get another job. Anyhow, my question. Since the trust is for the benefit of my daughter, and she is obviously a minor, what can I do to ensure it is protected? Should I assume that the trustee has her interests in mind and will not prematurely release money for something like this? Or does it sound like there is real danger that he will drain the trust? Is it possible for me to hire a lawyer to argue that the money should be saved for her later in life, unless the circumstances are truly dire? I'm not sure if I can actually hire a lawyer and get them involved because I am not the trustee. The company is. Thank you for any advice you can provide. Do you have a copy of the trust documents? Start there. Just because your ex wants money doesn't mean the trust documents allow for distributions for him. If the trustee starts making distributions you believe violate the trust, you can hire an attorney and bring a suit on behalf of your child to stop the trustee from doing so, and maybe also replace the trustee. Talk to a probate or estate planning attorney in your area. Your instincts sound correct here, and I applaud the fact that you are looking out for your daughter's interests here. We see too many posts where parents squander their children's trusts in this sub. I would start by talking to the trustee about it. As you indicated, you are capable of providing for her just fine. The money isn't for your ex or his alleged disability. Typically, when there is going to be a disbursement, especially an early one, it has to go through the court and be approved. There is usually a hearing where the judge inquires of the person seeking the funds why they want the funds. Courts, in my experience, don't tend to rubber stamp these requests. If the trustee indicates to you that they think this is legitimate and they intend to approve the disbursement, then you should consult with an attorney, a probate attorney, specifically one who often deals with trusts and/or minors, and dispute it for the reasons you've stated here. Incidentally, if he has not sought any medical treatment for his condition, based solely on what you've written here, he hasn't even tried medication. SSA, or any disability provider, isn't going to approve disability just because he claims he cannot work. They need medical records to substantiate it. Background. My husband and I bought a house in 2016 from a bank, as it had foreclosed upon the previous owner. About a year after we moved in, the previous owner showed up at our front door and tried to push past my sister to get into the house, saying she owned it. She left after threatening to call the police, but showed up 4 or 5 more times over the next year and a half, doing the same thing. She brought the police herself once, and they told her to leave once we showed him our contracts from closing on the house. He said that if she came back, it would be considered trespassing, and included in his paperwork that she wasn't welcome on the property. Fortunately, she hasn't been back since. We invested in a Ring doorbell and security cameras near each door after the first 2 visits. After that, she brought us to housing court in 2018 to try to evict us from the house we own, but did not show up because she put our address down as her own in the paperwork, therefore never received the notice to appear since her copy was mailed to us. Fortunately, we have title insurance, and they send a lawyer to represent us for free, and the judge dismissed the case with prejudice. About a year later, she did the exact same thing but showed up to court, saying she has a certified deed to the house, so she owns it. The same lawyer represented this time, and the judge dismissed it again. The mail part. A bit over a year ago, we began receiving her monthly phone bill in the mail. She didn't just forget to change the address after she moved. There was a 2 to 3 year gap with no mail in her name. So my husband brought a few of them, unopened, to the post office, explained what had been going on, and they said they'd take care of it. Then in summer 2019, the key to our mailbox no longer worked. It turned out she brought her deed to the post office, said she lost her key, and asked them to change the lock and give her a new key. Fortunately, when my husband realized the key didn't work, he went to the post office and was able to intercept before they gave her the new key, so I don't believe she actually gained access to the mailbox. During this time, the cell phone bills never stopped, and we've been receiving more mail in her name, from a radiology office, the Motor Vehicles Association, and other random non-spam items. I worry she's trying to do the same thing again, have mail sent to our house, steal it somehow, and attempt to use it to prove residency. My husband said when he told the post office manager what had been happening, they would report it, but we haven't heard anything at all. And as I mentioned, the mail in her name has increased since then. I tried calling the post inspector's hotline, but it went to voicemail, and I've never gotten a response from any voicemail I left to them. I'm just kind of at a loss of what my next move should be. I just want this mess to be over. Contact the lawyer that has represented you and keep them up to date. File another police report, and you can go online to the USPS to report that, so there is a paper trail. Awesome, thanks. I have a few police reports, from trying to force her way past my sister and a different time where she camped out in her car all night, blocking my car in the parking lot, basically scoping out the house overnight. I can try to request them and submit with the items to USPS, just to respond to the deleted comment asking what she wants. I have no idea what her intention was. That's part of what's stressful. We haven't heard from her since the last time she brought us to court, almost a year ago, but the mail has increased, so we feel like this isn't over. I saw the car idling behind mine before bed the night before, but didn't realize it was her in the dark. I assumed it was just a neighbor's guest or someone being picked up, dropped off. When we woke up around 6 a.m. the next morning, she was still there sleeping in the driver's seat, which is when I realized how creepy it was. We began the paperwork for the restraining order, but got caught up in other junk and didn't get around to submitting it. I definitely should have made that more of a priority at the time. The things didn't seem so bad in isolation since they were all like 6 to 8 months apart, but now that I list them all in one thread, you may want to also tape a notice to the inside of your mailbox stating, "So-and-so not at this address, all mail for so-and-so refused." And any mail that does get delivered, write addressee unknown and scribble out the last part of the handling barcode. I started seeing a therapist a couple of months ago. Nothing wild, just general depression, winter weather getting to me, etc. It's been quite helpful until recently. In the last few days, 2 of my old coworkers called me to say my old boss was saying things like, "OP basically hates herself now. I heard she's not doing well, really depressed." These were phone calls, and I didn't record anything because it was so unexpected. My old boss fired me in June of 2017. We didn't get along, general underperformance, no miscontact, just obviously didn't leave on great terms. At first, I thought it might be a friend of mine divulging things to another friend in the industry. But then after looking up said old boss, I see that her husband is my therapist. Very common last name, so I'd never realized they were related. I realize this is obviously problematic with the therapist, but I'm not sure what to do about it. He practices out of a leased single office space, so there's no overreaching practice management, administration to report to. I also don't know if what my old boss is saying is getting into legal issues, or if it's just, well, rude. I still live in the same city and work the same type of job in a rather small, close-knit industry. So on one hand, I'm worried about word traveling around our small community, but on the other hand, I'm worried about bad blood if I make too much of a fuss. Help. Edit. I'm now feeling reasonably confident about where to start with the therapist. Thank you. However, I feel completely lost about what to do about my old boss. Contact HR at the old employer? Hope it just dies down? At this point, I have no proof that I could show. Just saying I got phone calls, and I don't really want to pit my old coworkers against their boss if that can be avoided. You can lodge an ethical complaint against his license to practice psychology. It's an absolute violation, and while you may not have known that your boss and therapist were married, your therapist may have, which is another ethics violation. Edit. Just for your edification, here are the ethics violations within your situation so far. Referring to you by your name or other identifying details to someone not directly involved in your care. Acknowledging you as a patient in general. Therapists should, as a rule, pretend they don't know who you are outside of the clinic. Disclosing the details of your mental health to anyone outside of the clinic. Not immediately recusing themselves from giving you service once they knew about the connection between you and their spouse. As a therapist, I'm horrified by this. Absolutely complain to the board about this guy. This is beyond unforgivable. As for your boss, it's a little more difficult. Not sure legally what you can do about someone gossiping. I mean, are they slandering you? I have questions I haven't seen asked. Do you know if your ex-boss helps out at her husband's solo practice in any capacity? I used to work for an OBGYN where this was the case, so it's not unheard of in smaller practices. I see three possibilities here. Your ex-boss helps her husband out at his practice and has access to patient records, which makes her bound by HIPAA regulations. She accesses your records and divulges your information. They both get in trouble for HIPAA violations. It's his practice, so he's responsible too. But it's not necessarily an ethics violation on his part. Your ex-boss doesn't help out at his practice, but accessed your records anyway. He's in violation of HIPAA for not ensuring physical security of patient records and possibly letting her know that you are a patient at his practice. She's in trouble for illegally accessing your records. It may be an ethics violation on his part, depending on how she found out he was your therapist. Your therapist told your ex-boss everything. He's in trouble with HIPAA laws and the ethics board. There's clearly been a HIPAA violation, so report that first. Then file a complaint with the appropriate state licensing board. They can investigate potential ethics violations and any state-level laws that have been violated as well. New development summary. There's still a lot of slow bureaucratic stuff going on, but the most satisfying news is that my therapist is no longer practicing. I even saw the place he practiced out of listed as for sale on a real estate website while doing my own house hunting. New developments continued. Therapist was chatting about a client, me, to his wife, my old boss, that, it seemed, he really didn't know was his wife's old employee. Large company, closely knit, but not minuscule industry. I have a very peculiar family dynamic, so I think he talked about that. However, enough bits and pieces of identifying info came up that she suspected it was me. Unbeknownst to him, she found my paper records in his office and dug through them. Then thought it was a great idea to tell my old coworkers that I was depressed and had family issues. Neat. One of my coworkers put in her 2 weeks because of a relocating spouse shortly after, then agreed to write a formal statement of what she heard, which also helped a lot. Understandably, no one else was willing to because the company's already laid off so many people in the last year. Resolution in process. Therapist seems to be less in the wrong than I thought he was, though still in the wrong. Old boss is still awful. Therapist likely to receive some sort of reprimanding for both talking to his wife about me in that level of detail, as well as insecure record keeping. I don't know if he'll practice again.